quickly add something else that, Narayan Murthy has said, or people like Bhavesh Agarwal have said, that we are a developing country, and if you want to build a nation, then you have to work hard, and working 70 hours a week is what should be the norm. So this is what your industry leaders are saying. Where is the hope?
I'm going to come back to what Lloyd was saying. I completely support what he's saying. It's the message that goes out. It is the kind of attempt to set up a structure in place, which is to be applauded. So taking aside the whole issue of the politics of it and, grandstanding or whatever, the fact is that probably for the first time in the country, this conversation is being had as part of a manifesto. So I think that's a good thing. The issue is with anything that comes up. This is not even a dot on the horizon. It's a point in a manifesto of a party in one state. So it's, you're talking about a dot within a dot within a dot. The fact that it's out there is going to open a lot of eyes, and half the time it's because you become aware. Look at the Me Too movement as well. A lot of it was awareness, but when it got into legal, it became a very different, literally looking over your shoulder. I'm not suggesting it's the same thing, but when a consciousness about this issue comes up, and Anna's case is a very, very tragic case in point, where you literally saw the impact of inadvertent or unconcerned push towards goals. So you can see what happens if it goes wrong. So I think even this fact that we're having this conversation is a huge step in the right direction. So are we going to say from tomorrow morning, Shreya, you're going to, decide not to take a call after 9 o'clock, which is, or 5 in the morning, because if stories break at that time, will I not do something with the client if there's something urgent? We all have our pushes and pulls. We're going to respond because apart from being employees, we're also, and if the company does their work right, we're also invested in the goals of the organization. So we are moving towards that. We're not being cussed and saying, we will only do this as long as it suits us. If the company fails, so do we. There is a joint ownership of company goals, which I think any good employee would understand. So keeping aside the issue of implementation, keeping aside the issue of whether it's really practical to do, or whether I could go to my boss and say, somebody called me, the awareness of it, the fact that it's being discussed, I'm telling you, it's a huge step in the right direction of one very simple thing: respect for the employee. And an understanding that the person is not a unidimensional that comes to work. So I'm happy with that. Moving aside, I said, all the other political implications, I'm saying the fact this conversation is being had is good.
Okay. Krishna Hegde, would you want to come in here as spokesperson of the Shiv Sena? Almost everyone on this panel feels that the idea is very good. It's high time we had the sort of conversation we are having this evening. It may or may not be implementable, but baby steps are what are required. A lot of people on the other side, like Narayan Murthy, like Bhavesh Agarwal, have made the sort of argument that they have. I mean, Bhavesh Agarwal says, हमारे देश में तो concept ही नहीं था weekend off का, that India moved on the lunar calendar, and that Indians used to take maximum 2 days off in a month. Narayan Murthy is saying you should work at least 70 hours a week if you want to build the nation. Can the Prime Minister's work ethic, Krishna Hegde ji, can the Prime Minister's work ethic be put up as a role model for everyone? Look, the fact is that the Prime Minister is a very hardworking man. We all appreciate him for that, है ना? कि वो 16-17 घंटे काम करते हैं, 4 घंटे सोते हैं. He is dedicated to the nation. No one doubts that. But can that be held as an example to say that if a man in his late 70s is working 16 hours a day, why can't young people of today do the same? Because ये argument बहुत आती है.
Yeah, I think if you are ambitious and you want to do well, I think there has to be a work culture. And therefore, if someone like the Honorable Prime Minister has set it up, then people should automatically follow it. But I agree with Narayan Murthy ji and others because they are industry leaders. I think work hours, since I was also in corporate for a long time as a garment exporter, I must say that work hours must be the least of the stress. What is most stressful is, target stress or, pay scale stress, or ragging or bullying in office, or some other kind of stress which can happen, whether it's even maybe some other kind of stress. which is personal in nature. So it could be so many very kinds of stress. It's not only does have to do with the working hours. But I must tell you that it's good that there is a discussion on this. At least we are taking a few steps forward. But however said and done, there is some emergency services and non-emergency services. In non-emergency services, it's still fine. But in emergency services, like if you tell a medical doctor, no, listen, he doesn't pick up the call, the patient might die. If there's a fire in the building and the fireman or the fire officer doesn't pick up the call, there's a huge problem. And if there is there is a police case or some woman is in distress and the police officer decides not to pick the call at the station, then you can understand what's going to happen. So it depends on situation to situation, workspace to workspace, as to where can. So there can't be a a blanket thing like the manifesto of the MVA. I think that is extremely wrong. I think it's not. It's gone without a thought, and therefore I think they have to see and work on this before, by speaking to all other concerned factors like industry or medicals or everything.
No, so, obviously, Anish has made it very clear that, people like doctors, people like, people who work in the police force or in the armed forces or journalists, these rules obviously don't apply to them, right? Anish has made that very clear. But Anish,
Anish is a little smarter boy in his
arise.
party. So that is okay. He can make it clear, but I don't think his party has understood that. They should consult Anish a bit more.
नहीं कैसी बात कर रहे हैं? Emergency services तो emergency services तो सब समझते हैं ना क्या है, and we know that emergency services were working during COVID days as well. All of us were working, right, including politicians. Anish Gawande, there's a very interesting, I don't have too much time, but this just occurred to me. If the MVA comes to power and brings in this do not disturb or the right to disconnect law in the state of Maharashtra, right? So it's a government that has brought in a law. Can that government afford to ignore bureaucrats who will not pick up their calls after 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock? Karenge kya aap? This will open a can of worms. You think it's for industry, but the government, I mean, given the fact that it is the government that is bringing in the law, you have to implement it as well. So what if your bureaucrats start saying 6 baje ke baad hum kaam nahi karenge, we to only work 8 to 5 or 8 to 6?
Shreya, very often the government keeps telling us how hard they work and for how many hours they work. My only response to that would be that you have to work efficiently, not by counting the number of hours that you work, but how much work gets done in those hours. I think we have to shed this rhetoric. We have to shed this rhetoric of me putting in 18 hours a day is going to mean me doing better, etc., etc. And let me just say one final thing is that this is a bill that is to be introduced in the Maharashtra Assembly. Unlike our peers sitting in Parliament who do not want to debate or discuss anything before it is passed, we are very open and welcome to all suggestions and discussions on the issue. And I can guarantee you that the first people who will come support us are the very same Shiv Sena union workers who Krishna Hegdeji's party represents, who are just as tired, just as frustrated, just as sort of overwhelmed with the pressures being put on them as those of the white-collar employees, as the white-collar employees are. And this is about reintroducing a politics of care. I think it's very, very sad today that our governments have stopped caring. And we have to ensure that we have concerns of citizens that are very real, brought to the table, discussed, debated, and then acted upon.
Okay, Anish Gawande, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. This was a good debate and a good discussion. I'm glad we could have this conversation. Thank you very much, Krishna Hegde, spokesperson of the Shiva Sena. We'll see if it comes to pass that the bill is actually introduced in the House in Maharashtra, what the Shiva Sena, the Shinde faction will do. Will it go with it or will it go against it? We'll wait and watch. वो बाद में ही चलेगा, पता चलेगा. Thank you, Lloyd Matthias.